Welcome to the St. John Alive podcast. I am your host, Alan Day. We're very excited to be continuing our Lenten podcast series on finding inner peace. And we're joined again in the studio today by Nicolette Ellinghausen and Debbie Ryan. Thank you, ladies, for being here. Appreciate it. So I wanted to, before we dive in, I wanted to kind of hear if there has been any fruit in your own lives from last week's conversation. Has there been any sort of growth or change or change in perspective on things?
I think it's raised my awareness about peace and maybe just checking in with myself now and then about, am I experiencing peace of mind and peace of heart? And when the answer is yes, then I'm challenging myself, well, is it because everything's going great, or is it real true peace of heart from God? So It's just kind of raised my awareness and made me think about things.
Absolutely. I find that awareness in my own life has created I don't know. It's almost like it's a bigger challenge for me, because I wanted to dive in to all the excitement in Lent and searching for inner peace. And I figured, I'll be more at peace, not realizing, of course, this is the season where we have to do the hard work. So of course it's going to become more difficult.
Right.
Being mindful and aware of that obviously has posed some challenges. So for sure. Awesome. So today I wanted to kind of dive into the topic of control as an illusion and how the more we surrender, the more we become free, and that true peace is found in surrendering to God. So I wanted to turn to Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6, which says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not rely on your own insight. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths." So what are some ways in which your life right now, are some areas in your life right now where you feel like you need control?
I don't know that I feel I need control. I would like control. I realize that I probably won't have control, but there's a legal issue going on right now that I would love to have control over, but I realize that it's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so again, I just have to, I'm doing a 9-week novena, praying for my, the outcome that I hope, works best for all concerned, and just have to, at the end of things, just turn it over.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm with you. I've come to a point of realizing how little control I have, even though sometimes I wish that I did. But I have learned that you can't control people. Sure. I'm kind of past that. Because when you do try to control people, it usually ends up just causing pain and trouble, and it closes doors. It closes the doors of hearts when you're trying to control someone. So it's certainly not people that I would be trying to control. But if I could wish, I guess my wishful control would just be that people would love God and live out the gospel, just knowing that that's the only place where there's really true happiness and peace. So, that would be my hope, but I know that's in God's hands. And like Nicolette, my place is mostly to pray and then wait on the Lord for opportunities if he would choose to use me.
Sure.
I think a lot in songs. Songs minister to me so much. It can be simple songs or beautiful songs, but there's a song that I've been teaching my granddaughter lately. It's an old song, and you probably heard it before, but it's love is something, if you give it away, you'll end up having more. Love is like a golden penny. Hold it tight and you won't have any. Spend it, give it, share it with many, and you'll end up having more. And I think about that song, and I like to put in the word control there, that control is something if you give it away or give it to God, and you'll end up having freedom. And that's something I have found. The more of that control that I release and give to God, the more freedom that I feel to be me and to be who God wants me to be.
Yeah. Is there a certain circumstance or instance that you can think of where you've experienced that?
Yes. Probably many.
That you'd be willing to share.
Right, that I'd be willing to share. That's what I have to think about for a minute. Let me think a minute while Nicolette talks, and I'll come back to me in a minute, okay?
Yeah.
Well, and I'll have to say that giving up control is not something that I've always been able to do. especially in my corporate life before I retired. I would go to different corporate training and things like that. And one of the things I learned is that people are, when they are most miserable, it's because of a lack of control. When people are in control, they're happier because they feel that they've got the outcome and everything like that. So that's kind of what drove my corporate life. And then as I got older and started approaching retirement, and now even more so in retirement, I realized that the reality in my life anyhow is that when I am not in control of the situation, if I can comfortably turn it over to God, then I'm more at peace. So control is not something that I strive for, even though that's the way, probably 20 years in my corporate career, that was driving me, but not so much anymore.
Sure. Yeah.
And that gets me thinking, and that reminds me just about that, how what you're saying, just that we have to keep giving that away, giving it to God. And I had a situation last year that brought a lot of uncertainty and puzzlement and stress in my life. Without going into the detail of the situation, it just lasted about a month. And it was really difficult for me because how I felt like I was being maybe perceived by others in a way that really wasn't true. And I just kind of had to live with that. I was in a place where I couldn't really defend myself. And I had to really give that to God and trust God to be my defender and my protector. So during that time, I can't say that I had perfect peace every moment, but I kept on giving it to God. I just kept on saying, Lord, take this. And, searching my heart too, and making sure that there was nothing in my heart that was wrong or evil. And at the same time, just asking him to take it and to restore that peace, as well as to, help redeem the situation. And like I said, it lasted. I mean, it kind of lasted a month. And there wasn't anything I could do. And that was just a real exercise to me. It's one of the hardest things I think that's happened to me in, I almost want to say my whole life, but at least in the last decade or two. And, I felt the stress outwardly and I wrestled with it at times. But looking back now, I'm thankful because the thing I kept reminding myself of during that period is that God allowed this, he allowed this to happen. Not that he caused it, but he allowed it, and he allowed it for a purpose. And that he can bring good out of this situation. And that gave me some anticipation of just kind of looking, God, what are you going to do with this? How is this going to turn out in a good way? Not that I wanted to, end up looking like a hero or not that, but just what are you going to do for me in this? And honestly, part of it was peace. As the situation got redeemed, it brought peace because I could see purpose in it and I could see how it helped me to have a closer walk with him.
Sure, absolutely. In what way do we understand control as an illusion? Like, are there circumstances where you can think of where you realized that your control over the situation, even if you had control, it was not really control? And how can you lean into like understanding and letting go and letting God have control in those moments?
I think it happens almost on a daily basis. I went to New York City with my granddaughters, and there was all kinds of orchestration, if you will, planning, especially related to the airline, the flight and everything like that. And I remember somebody asked me, "Are you worried about the plane or the flight?" And I said, "I'm not worried about the flight." I says, things can happen, weather can happen, delays can happen, and I'll just have to respond to them as is. But so those are the types of things that if you realize that stuff is out there and it's going to happen and you have absolutely no control over it, you can't, the more you let that go, the freer you become. Because in fact, trying to control things is where anxiety comes in. So something as simple as, you're in a hurry to get to the airport and traffic's bad because it was, winter time and everything like that. And you just have to deep breath. Okay, God, you're in control. We're here early enough. We shouldn't have a problem. And if we do, we'll deal with it. And in fact, the one granddaughter that I was traveling with, she had to go back to South Carolina, and her plane was delayed. And she's in the Air Force, so she doesn't have the flexibility that I do in retirement. Sure. And so, but even she's got a strong faith, and she just kind of rolled with the punches and got a hold of the right people and explained the situation. And you have to just realize that there's alternatives for the different plans that you have.
Absolutely. That's something I encounter on a daily basis. Every day I have to make the decision coming out of my street I live on. Do I turn right and take the back roads to school, or do I turn left and take the highway? And some days when I'm late, I'm like, I'll take the highway because I can go faster and get where I need to go. And some days I'll leave on time, and sometimes when Jen is at work and I've got all 6 kids with me and I'm trying to get the older 4 to school, and, I'm feeling good about myself because I got out on time, and we're going to close the gap, and we're going to give ourselves enough leeway. We're going to take the highway today. And I turn left and I get on 23, and sure enough, it's dead stopped because there's an accident, and you feel like you were in control, but all of a sudden you have no control, and you can't get off the highway because it's 23. There's nowhere to go. And, you don't know until you get around that blind curve that everything's dead stopped. And those are the moments where I have to decide, how am I going to relinquish control to the Lord? How am I going to allow him to redeem the situation? Like you said, he can and will redeem that. How am I going to respond? Am I going to sit there anxiously going, come on, get out of the way, which gives me no progress.
Blaring
on the
your
highway.
horn, maybe.
Exactly. It's not going to get me anywhere. Or I can sit there and I can just say, you know what? We're now going to be late for school, and I can enjoy this time with my children. And usually we turn on some music and have a little sing along, or we'll, tell knock-knock jokes. And the same 3 knock-knock jokes that have been told for the last 4 years in my house. So, but if we have a good time with it, that's where I can definitely say the Lord can then redeem that time with my family, even if it's in the car sitting in traffic. There's nothing else you can do.
That's exactly right. And just like you say, small examples like that are so good. And I think having had children and living in our home for so many years, in a way really did help prepare me for the understanding of how little control I have. Because we all know when you have children, things get out of control very fast, no matter how organized you are or aren't. And no matter how much you might once in a while think you have your ducks in line, but then, something happens. Somebody gets sick, or somebody acts up, or somebody isn't ready, or somebody doesn't cooperate. And then all of a sudden your plans just go amiss. And, that was hard when I was younger. It was like, why can't you cooperate? Didn't you see I had this all figured out so we could look good? Now we don't look so good. We're going to be late for church, or, we're going to let somebody down because we didn't fulfill what we were going to do because all this happened. But, those times of humbling really help you realize how little control that you have. And now when we don't have children in the house, but it's the same opportunities come along to trust God and to realize that you're not in control. And it could be even sickness, having things planned, and you're going to do this and go here, and even meet up with family, and then all of a sudden there's sickness, and it's just not going to happen. They're not going to come after all because everybody got sick, or you're not going to be able to be there. And I'm learning, I should say, instead of really, dwelling on the disappointment and of course you can feel the disappointment of plans that were changed, but of just actively trusting God, and not to be repetitive, but just saying, God, you must have something else today for me to do. When things change, then God has something else to fill in the gap. And even for me, when I've gotten sick myself, and, I take good care of myself. I eat very well, and I believe in just taking care of your body, nutrition, fitness, and all that. And when I get sick, it's like, what? How did that have to happen? But then, I find myself in a different place than I was the day before. And I've just learned, like, all right, this is my time to just settle in, have more prayer time, rest, and let the world go on without me. And it's humbling. But God uses those humbling situations, too, to refine us and bring us closer to him.
Yeah. The illness thing is a really difficult one.
Yes, it is.
Because a lot of times you have zero control in that situation. Right. And I remember the first time I got pneumonia was absolutely miserable. It was actually right after we moved here to Michigan. And, I was trying to keep pace with a new job and make a good impression and obviously be consistent for the youth and things like that. And I got really sick and it turned into pneumonia in both lungs. And the doctor just looked at me and was like, you have to go home and lay on the couch for about 5 days. Oh, yeah. And that was the hardest thing to do because I was like, my wife was pregnant with twins. Oh. I had the other 2 little ones in the house. And
that was hard.
Laying on that couch was miserable in some sense, beside the fact that I was sick. But like I'm used to just going at a really high level all the time and have to stop and kind of actually take care of myself and let go of a lot of those expectations that I had over life just to heal. It was really difficult to do. But it was also very fruitful because it helped me realize that there are people around me that do care and will support, and I can let go of a lot of those things that I thought I had to have control over. But like you said, it's like sometimes you have to just let the world go on around you and take that time to rest.
And Debbie mentioned the word humble. Being in control is, just feeds your pride. Or maybe pride feeds the control thing. So if you're going to, it's an old saying, but, let go and let God. You can't say it any more simply than that. If you're going to try to control things, it's very much a matter of pride. And one of the things when I was retiring, everybody's telling me, you're never going to be able to let go, and you're always going to be so busy, and you're going to be calling work all the time to check on this and check on that. And I said, nope. I said, you know what? I've done this for this many years, and it's time for somebody else to do it now. I enjoyed the experience. Time to bless somebody else with those opportunities.
It's a new season.
Yes.
Yeah. And you mentioned the word fruitful. I think that is just a good word to describe any of these kind of situations, that God can make it a fruitful time. And you mentioned yourself, just being served by others and realizing others care. And another thing I thought about too is finding more compassion for others too. When you go through something like that, then it just helps you to really be compassionate and relate to other people. And sometimes I think, like, what would it be like to be a person who never had gotten sick or never suffered? And I feel like, God can have many ways, of course, of refining us, but suffering is definitely one of the ways. And it seems to me like, for myself anyway, if it wasn't for suffering that I've gone through, I would be a pretty shallow person. And, every time I have suffering to have to bear, I feel like God is He uses that to deepen us, not only deepen our faith in Him, but just to give us more depth as people that can relate to other people and to continue this journey of life.
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting that you, Nicolette, were talking about the pride and the arrogance that comes along with this sense of control. And that's one thing that I've had to remind myself of and learn kind of the hard way over the course of time, that, when we think the world revolves around us and we have to be, have our hands on the wheel at all times, it really is in some sense kind of a slap in the face to the guidance and the grace that God is pouring into our lives, because it's saying, like, God, you can't handle this without me. I am the tool that you're using to make the wheel go around. And the reality is that that's not true, which is hard because that does hit us deep in our pride and in our, our sense of self-worth is like, what value do I have if I'm not the thing that makes the world go around? And it's a really good opportunity for us to sit back and find peace in just our identity in light of Christ, not necessarily what we do, but who we are, who Christ has called us to be, who we are in him, not so much how we, the things that we produce or the things that we make happen in this world, but how we behave, how we treat others, the way that we speak to other people, the way that we handle those situations like illness or retirement. Are we handling those situations with grace, or are we not being graceful about it? That's really where it comes to, being peaceful or being at peace or not at peace, is how are we handling those situations, for sure.
I was listening to a homily series by Father Mike Schmidt, and one of the things he was emphasizing is greatness, that we're all called to be great. And at first I thought, what does that mean? But the way that he explained it, which I've really chewed on this a lot, that we are called to be great. It doesn't mean to accomplish great things, that we have to accomplish these big, great things, but it's to be great. And that means in virtue, in our trust for God, and in who we are in Christ, to let him make us who he wants to be. That is greatness. It's not all the things you can list that you did and accomplished in your life. It's who you let God make you be.
Right.
So I've really chewed on that a lot, about being called to greatness. And I think about every situation that God allows in our lives. He's helping us to be that, to be great. He's giving us the opportunity to be great through him, not in and of ourselves, but through, how he enables us through the Holy Spirit, and he walks with us through each of these trials.
Absolutely. What does surrendering control look like on a practical level and on the day-to-day for you all, based on your situation, your circumstances you find yourself in? How do you let go of control in those moments where you're inclined to take control?
Well, I feel like true surrender, I had to think about that quite a bit, because it's kind of hard to put that into words, because it's going to look different for different people.
Sure.
But I mean, the more I thought about it, I think true surrender is going to look like some suffering. It's going to look like humility, listening, serving, giving, being willing to be wrong, or at times to be wronged, willing to be inconvenienced and to be spent for the sake of others, serving someone that you may have negative feelings about. That was another thought that came to me, and treating everyone with dignity and respect. And I think true surrender is going to look like someone who's looking at their own faults more than the faults of other people. So those were just some thoughts that I had about true surrender, and exactly, how it's going to look. It's going to look different in different people, but I think that's some of either the fruit of it or the ingredients that cause it to happen.
I mentioned at the beginning that there's a legal matter that I realize I really can't control, but again, you'd like to have an outcome in your direction. And so I've got this 9-week novena that I'm trying to do. So surrendering to me is just simply saying, God, if I have to believe that whatever the outcome is, it is your will, and you're directing it for my good and perhaps for the good of others as well. And I just have to, if I did not believe that God was in control, it would really make my life a whole lot worse, because I've often said that, it's a good thing I'm not God, because I'd probably really screw it up. So I've got to believe that he is doing things for my good and the good of those around me and those associated with me in whatever way. And it relieves the pressure. It absolutely does.
Yeah, 100%. I find myself always having to remind myself of the importance of humility, that elusive virtue that once you think you've got it, you've lost it.
Yeah.
For me, it's always been important to pray the litany of humility. That was when I came across that in college. I was really mad that I hadn't come across it before, because it's huge. And for me, just going through each one of those items in that litany of humility and praying to the Lord that you would have the strength to let go of that was huge, especially when it gets to the part of the prayer where it's talking about the other people that insult you and humiliate you and
say all manner of evil against you falsely.
Exactly, right? And just having the strength to let go of that and not be worried about that. It's such a deep level of trust in God's grace and providence in your life that it's really difficult, but I have to remind myself constantly to do it because it is all too frequent that my form of control is trying to control what other people think of me. Yeah. So.
And even on just a more daily practical level, not kind of putting aside like persecution or that kind of thing, is just something my husband likes to say often that he says to himself is these words, "My life is over." And I think we said that a lot when we had our children at home because, you might have had goals that you wanted to accomplish in that day, or even in your own devotional time with the Lord. You had these big goals of prayer and Bible study, but when you have children, your life is over. You can't always get to that, but
in the best possible way.
In the best possible way, right?
Yeah.
So even now, as especially a few years back, our grandson, who's older now, but he would come and spend a lot of time with us in the summer. And my husband, we loved it. I mean, trust me, it was the highlight of our summer that he came, like even for a month sometimes. But Bob would say, like, yeah, my life is over when he's here because it's our chance and our time to really invest in him and spend time with him. And not have high expectations about what we're going to accomplish. And, I think there's times when we're just called to that for other people. Say you had some big plans that you wanted to accomplish, like in your home. You want to clean the whole house today and just spring cleaning and make it, a nice haven to enjoy the change of the season. And then, suddenly there's somebody who needs you. And I'm sure, Alan, you know about that even more than we do. And you give up your plans and you leave your house a mess, you leave the dishes in the sink and you go to help someone else. And it's like your life is over because you're going to give to somebody else. And that's a hard place to be, but it's sometimes God calls us to that.
And that's the crazy thing about the vocation of family is that's actually a huge source of joy for me. And as I was discerning religious vocation versus married vocation, I was talking with my spiritual director at the time, and for me, the thing that kept coming to my mind was, yes, it's a beautiful thing to like make the sacrifices of the priesthood and be the priest that stands at that point in time and space where heaven and earth meet in the Eucharist. But the thing that I couldn't get out of my head was having to wake up at 3:00 in the morning to take care of a child with an earache. I'm like, I don't know why. Because that's not an appealing situation. There's nothing joyful about that. You have the suffering of a child. But,
that's very true.
And you're exhausted because you're up at 3:00 in the morning. But there's something about that sacrifice that seemed so heroic. And there is some inner sense of joy that comes from being in that situation where you have to let go of everything that you value, and at that point, it's probably just sleep to care for somebody else. And it's not so much that I do it because, it makes me feel like a superhero and everyone's patting me on the back because oftentimes it's 3:00 in the morning and everyone's asleep. You do it because when you're done, you know that you've done the right thing. It is right and just in some sense.
And so Bob, like Bob was saying, my life is over, but the fact is you've handed your life over to God and you've handed your life over to your family.
Right.
What greater opportunity, what greater gift is there almost?
And I mean, our church has a great history of that too. If you look at the saints and the martyrs, I mean, they literally gave their lives up. Their lives literally were over. We're experiencing on a different level where there's, pain and, involved, but there's different levels of that too. And I often think about that, just having in the back of my mind when I am having to give up something or my time or that, well, there's a lot of people before you who have done the same and much, much greater. So don't complain. Just don't complain about it. Just do it.
Right. And there's so many opportunities even outside of, family life to do this. And it really does boil down to the way that we treat the people around us.
Yes.
It could just be the way that you speak to the customer service person at the coffee shop.
Absolutely,
A lot of
yes.
times those people are verbally abused because it's before someone's had their morning coffee. But if you just show up and you offer kindness and you realize that interaction isn't about you, right? It's about what the Lord wants to do in the heart of that person, whether that person believes in God or not. You can still witness to the love of Christ in that person's life by treating them with dignity and respect. And it's amazing how just one simple kind interaction can change somebody's whole day. I'm sorry. I can't tell you the number of times I've pulled up to like a fast food window or a coffee shop, and there's a sign taped to the window that says, "We do not tolerate verbal abuse to our employees." And I look at them and I'm like, it was in a doctor's office. The most recent time I saw it, it was in a doctor's office. And I said, "I am so sorry that you have to have that sign up there." And she goes, "Yeah, just the other day we had to call the police." Oh no. So it's amazing how far just a little bit of kindness will go, because you never know how infrequent it is in someone's life.
And yet, go ahead.
The thing is, we talked about, giving up your life for your family or the priesthood. It can happen in even the single life, the
100%.
consecrated life when you're single, because like you said, there's people out there that you would interface with. And so it could be, in retail or, in charitable organizations or whatever. So the key is to get out of yourself and give to others.
100%. Yep.
And like you said, there's opportunities everywhere to do that. And I was even hearing someone was saying, about if you want to be evangelical, if you want to share your faith, and maybe you're a little bit timid about sharing your faith with people, start somewhere. Like, just start with greeting and being friendly to the cashier at the grocery store and saying hello. Just start somewhere. And even if you're not ready to share the gospel or talk about Jesus, or just be friendly to the cashier. And it's funny because that was, when I read that, I was really, it shouldn't have been shocking to me, but it kind of was. And it kind of changed me, because I just realized I'm really not that friendly to people at the grocery store. I mean, I guess I was just looking at someone at the cash register like, you're just somebody here to serve me, instead of like, this is a person, who has dignity, and God has made them in their image. This is a person just like me, not below me, not above me. This is a person just like me. And, why not take a minute to say hello or ask them how their day is or something? And it's sort of been a whole revolution for me. Not that I was mean or, would ever abuse someone in the retail, but just kind of taking them for granted. I think that was it. And just realizing they're a person to talk to with dignity.
100%. I appreciate you ladies taking the time to come down and chat with us today and share your experiences with control and relinquishing control and leaning into the grace of God. And we do value your time and your conversation. And thank you all for tuning in, and catch you in the next one.